This is the Pubcast Shot. I'm John Loomer, and today we're going to talk about whether it's time to abandon lookalike audiences. Let's go. All right, welcome back to the Pubcast. I'm John Loomer, and today let's talk about lookalike audiences. Now, this is a feature. It's been around since 2014. I know because I wrote about it in 2014, back in March of 2014. And back then, it made a lot of sense, right? So you may recall the targeting inputs we provided were super important. We defined who would see our ads. We would provide interests and maybe custom audiences. I mean, 2014, there weren't a ton of options then, but it was really hard to know who are the proper people that we should be putting in here, especially with interests. But by providing lookalike audiences, now we could give Meta, okay, these are our ideal people, our website visitors, our email list, our paying customers, our Facebook followers. Now go out, find people like these people, right? So this allowed us to scale, to expand our audience, find people beyond those who are already engaged with us, who are already on our email list, and find people who we assume are similar to them, right? There's a lot of voodoo going on there. We don't really know how it worked. We kind of just took it for granted that it was a good way to create a much broader audience to reach new people. But targeting works differently now. First of all, it's much smarter. Second, there's far less targeting control, right? Whether you use broad targeting or not, your audience is automatically expanded in many cases. So if you use Advantage Plus Audience, whatever you provide is just a suggestion. If you use original audiences, but you optimize for a purchase or a conversion of some kind, your lookalike audience is expanded. Your detailed targeting is expanded, right? So it's all just kind of us giving the algorithm ideas potentially, but we really don't know how much that stuff matters. I've done tests that suggest that Meta pretty much ignores anything we put in there now if it can be expanded. So really now targeting's built around the algorithm that searches for people who are willing to perform our desired action. So if you want a purchase, it's going to search out people who are likely to purchase from you. And especially when it's a purchase, the algorithm actually bakes in remarketing. And I've done this with my own testing. You should test your own, but using audience segments and sales campaigns, I found that anywhere from 25 to 35, 50% even of my budget is automatically spent on remarketing when I'm going broad. And that's a big deal. So in a way, the algorithm is already working as one big lookalike audience while also remarketing at the same time. So while lookalike audiences make a lot of sense in theory, they may have been required 10 years ago because it was so confusing building that broader audience and knowing where to start. That helped us because there are too many options, honestly, when it came to interests and behaviors back then, that we didn't really know which ones were valid, which ones weren't, which ones were effective, which ones were. There's so much testing that had to be done to figure that out. But now the algorithm does all that for us. And even if you make the argument that algorithmic targeting has flaws, which it does, you can't really avoid it anymore, right? So when you use that lookalike audience, that's usually just kind of a suggestion to start. It's going to expand off of that in many cases. But the algorithm needed something like a lookalike audience 10 years ago. It needed us to define who this source was that it could find more people like that. But the concept is outdated. Meta already knows who your most valuable audience is. And Meta prioritizes those people. We know that is already happening. That is proven with audience segments. Now, I won't ever say that something never works or you shouldn't ever use lookalike audiences, but I gotta admit, I'm pretty close in this case. Providing lookalike audiences, in my opinion, is unnecessary busyness because you think it's necessary and you think what you're doing is productive and making an impact. But I don't really believe it's doing anything. Now, you can prove this. Don't just take my word for it. Run tests. I'm not saying just run one test at $10 a day or something. This is something you've got to continually test and decide on your own whether this still makes sense. So test running lookalike audiences like you normally do. And first of all, if you use lookalike audiences with Advantage Plus audience, that's pretty much ignored anyway, just so you know. It's probably not contributing to your results in any way. If you're using lookalike audiences with original audiences and it's expanded, just remember that. So you're relying on the same algorithm to build the lookalike audience that you trust. It's that same network that's running algorithmic targeting for you too. All right, understand that. But anyway, test it with original audiences, lookalike audiences. Use an Advantage Plus audience without suggestions at all. It sounds scary, but do it. Especially when optimizing for purchases, set it up that way. The bottom line here, find what works for you. If you've proven to yourself over and over, especially with large sample size and with budgets, that this is still effective for you, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy and don't do it. But oftentimes what you're doing is creating more work for yourself than is necessary, especially if you're creating multiple ad sets for your targeting, one that's lookalike, one that's something else, et cetera, which is inefficient. But keep questioning your assumptions, because what I believed 10 years ago is no longer true to me. It wasn't easy to make that change, but the way the system works changes. The features change. The effectiveness of the algorithm changes, and how much of your input that is needed changes. As a result, your strategies should change too. Test them. I have written well over 1,000 blog posts over the years for johnloomer.com on the topic of Facebook, now Meta advertising. And this includes anything from tutorials to new feature announcements to case studies and tests and experiments, and a little bit of everything in between. To be honest with you, my blog is what I became famous for. It's why I have a business in the first place. Now, while not everybody consumes content in this way, especially a detailed tutorial, which is kind of my expertise, maybe you do. And I hope you're following me there. I publish one blog post every week right now. I've changed my cadence through the years, but that's where I'm falling these days, so that I can also do podcast episodes and videos as well. You may not be alerted right now once I've published a new blog post, but we can change that. Just go to johnloomer.com/alerts. Thanks again for joining me today. Until next time, do awesome things. I'm out.